Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we take stacks of source material articles, research, specialized notes, and distill them into instant, actionable knowledge. We're here to give you the shortcut to being well-informed.
Today, we're embarking on a journey that, well, it could fundamentally change how you think about your own thoughts. Our deep dive is into the ultimate operating system language.
Right.
And we're drawing from neuroscience, psychology, and some pretty high-level philosophy to explore the profound, often unconscious power of words to construct and really define the reality you live in.
Okay, so let's unpack this right out of the gate, because the central premise we found across these sources is, it's genuinely radical. It challenges our whole understanding of perception.
It really does. The claim is that the influence of language on the mind, on consciousness, is actually greater than the influence of light entering your eye.
Just think about that for a second.
Yeah. Light shows us what's objectively there. A chair, a table, a color. But language, by giving it a definition, it actually changes the universe for you, the speaker. It dictates what those physical things mean. We're talking about the architecture of experience.
And to really grasp that, you have to look at the philosophical shift that happened. For a long time, especially in the modern era after the Industrial Revolution, the goal was always to find a single objective reality.
Capital R reality.
Yeah.
Capital T truth.
Exactly. The idea was if we just gather enough data, we'll find the truth.
But then the sources pivot hard into the postmodern era, which was really kicked off by semiotics, the study of signs and meaning.
Yeah.
And this shift argues that everything we experience is filtered through linguistic meaning.
And once meaning gets involved, that idea of a single objective truth just becomes ambiguous.
It does. And meaning becomes the highest power.
That is a huge claim, though. So are we saying that objective reality is secondary to the story we tell about it? What does that mean for someone just trying to navigate everyday life?
It means that the quality of your life depends far more on the meaning you assign to events than on the actual events themselves. And the sources make this critical distinction. Only the past and the present contain truth. The future, by definition, is fantasy.
But wait, if the future is just fantasy, why do we bother planning or hoping for anything?
Because it's a necessary fantasy.
Okay.
It's an adaptive fantasy. It's the engine that drives action.
Okay.
Take buying a lottery ticket. Objectively, financially, it's a terrible decision. The chance of return is almost zero. But that tiny spark of fantasy, the possibility of wealth, that gives that person a future goal.
A plot line.
A required plot line. And with it, hope. And that hope, which is entirely linguistic, entirely conceptual, that's what makes life adaptive. That's the language operating system at work.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we need to find the fundamental building block for all that meaning. And that brings us to the concept itself, or what some sources call image schema.
Right. Language isn't this abstract thing floating around. It's built on these internal representations, these concepts, and they're generated directly from our basic body experience.
Yeah. I don't need to see a specific dog in front of me to understand the word dog.
Exactly. Your mind instantly activates a concept built from every past interaction you've had with a dog, sensory, visual, emotional, everything.
And that's so critical because it proves that symbol systems and concepts are not, uniquely human. If the concept is the mental map, then other animals clearly have these maps too.
The examples are just fantastic. Like bees, they don't use sounds, they use geometry. They do this precise dance, a kinetic symbol, to tell the other bees the location, the distance, even the quantity of nectar.
The dance is the symbol, the nectar is the reference. It's a perfect correlation.
Or what about the vervet monkeys? They have distinct vocal calls that are basically single word symbols. One call for eagle, another for snake, a different one for leopard.
And when they hear the eagle call, they all look up. They hear the snake call, they look down. They're responding to the internal concept of the threat, even if they can't see the actual predator.
It's that level of abstraction that gets me. Even pigeons in these controlled experiments could recognize concepts. They learn to peck at pictures of trees or cars with four wheels to get a reward. They're matching a visual to a pre-verbal concept.
And all these examples reinforce what we call the primacy of the body. Concepts start as sensory input generated by the body. Early humans probably expressed these concepts through, body language, physical signals. Speech came later, building on that foundation.
So the physical input is still the core of the concept, even when we turn it into a sound.
Exactly. So if the body is the source and the concept is the foundation of meaning, how does the brain actually organize all of this? This is where we get into the neuroscience, into the maps of meaning. We can trace this mapping process right back to basic perception. Let's start with vision, thanks to the Nobel Prize-winning work of Hubel and Voissel back in 1959.
Right, they studied how we see, and they found these specialized neurons in the visual cortex that only respond to the simplest things like lines, edges, and points, the on-center and off-center neurons. It's a very sort of reductionist view of reality.
But here's the magic trick of the brain. Perception is holistic. Your brain doesn't just see a collection of lines and dots. It instantly combines all those separate neural responses so that you see a whole chair or a whole face.
So a concept is just the stable map that's formed by that holistic integration.
Precisely.
Okay, so if the visual concept of a chair is a map of combined physical inputs, what happens when we use the word? Does the word chair create its own separate map?
Not at all, and this is the fascinating part. Functional MRI studies show that words activate entire semantic maps, these huge neural networks, mostly in the temporal lobe. They don't light up one spot, they light up a whole web of meaning.
Can you give us an example of how fast that network processing is?
Sure, take a simple word like top. The second you hear it, your brain immediately activates maps related to all its different meanings. So, position, like the top of a mountain, rank, like a top 10 list, and location,
And the brain sorts it out with context.
instantly. If you hear top priority, the rank part wins. If you hear top shelf, the position part wins. The whole map is ready for whatever context comes next.
That makes sense. But wait, so are these maps only activated by language? Or does seeing something in the physical world activate the exact same map?
And that's where the connection between the physical and the linguistic becomes undeniable. Researchers showed people films with no dialogue at all, just visuals. And yet, the semantic areas in their brains for concepts like women or face lit up
Wow.
just from the visuals. This is the proof. The concept is the seamless link where visual experience and linguistic information merge into one.
That is just mind-blowing. It means thinking the word face and seeing an actual face use the same neural address. So we know about the classic language centers, right? Wernicke's area for comprehension, Bronca's area for syntax. What does sentence structure tell us about this?
It tells us the brain hates uncertainty. We process speech in chunks, in sentences, not word by word. The brain holds meaning in suspense until it has enough context.
Like the mouse example.
Exactly. If you hear, the mouse is near the computer, you don't immediately think of a rodent. You wait until the end of the sentence to correctly assign the meaning, the computer cursor, and you bypass the animal concept entirely.
Okay, so that's how we handle basic concepts. But what about abstract ideas? Are concepts like, say, justice or time also physically anchored?
Oh, absolutely. This brings us to embodied schemas, the unconscious physical rules that structure our most abstract thoughts. This is where you realize your body is constantly informing your metaphysics.
This is one of those aha moments that explains so much about why we say the things we say. Let's start with the container concept.
Right. Why do we just know that water is safely in a glass and won't suddenly fall out when we lift it? It's not just gravity, it's the container concept.
And that comes from early bodily experience.
Deep, early experience. Being held by a parent, wearing clothes, just existing within physical boundaries. We then project that physical experience onto abstract things. So we say things like, he's struggling to stay in bounds during the argument, or I need to get out of this routine.
That feeling of being constrained or out of bounds is the container schema.
It's the schema at work.
Yeah.
And the orientation schema is probably the most obvious one. We say our spirits are high, or we feel low, happy is up, sad is down.
And that's rooted in ancient human experience. Physical orientation mapped directly to social status. Standing tall meant strength, high status. Crouching meant weakness, low status.
Exactly. The physical hierarchy became a metaphorical, emotional one. But the most crucial one, especially for mental health, is the source path goal schema.
The one that maps life itself as a journey.
It's the mandatory plot line for the self. It demands that the future exists and has meaning, and it forces us along a path from a source to a goal. And when that plot line breaks, a sudden illness, a layoff, a divorce, the entire sense of meaning and self-worth just collapses.
So that feeling of hitting a wall in your career isn't just burnout. It's a failure of the linguistic schema that gives your future meaning.
And this deep need for that source path goal structure is what leads us to build the autobiographical self, which is really just the main character we invent to star in our own life story.
The self as a narrative, such a powerful idea, but it's also inherently a distortion, right? Our raw life experience is so rich. It's four-dimensional with height, depth, time. But when we tell a story about it, we compress all of that into a single, one-dimensional line of language.
And that compression forces you to interpret, to simplify. and often to distort the raw experience. You leave out the boring parts, you emphasize the dramatic parts, all to make the story coherent.
But if we know the narrative is a distortion, how can therapy based on rewriting that story actually work? Aren't we just swapping one simplification for another?
That's the core tension. But it works because the very act of speaking, of forming a grammatically correct sentence, is an act of creation. It's not just relaying truth. Language lets us relate things abstractly, subject, verb, object, completely independent of the physical world. And for the brain's semantic map, that linguistic creation is what matters.
And this leads to the ultimate linguistic magic trick, the blending of concepts, the blending of mental spaces. This is how we go beyond just reporting and actually invent new things.
Absolutely. You take the concept of Mickey Mouse and you blend it with the concept of eagle wings, and you can imagine a flying Mickey Mouse. Or, more profoundly, you take the concept of a role model and blend it with your concept of self.
And that blending is what creates those powerful, often illusory meanings.
Like the hope from the lottery ticket. It's essential for imagination, for adaptive behavior.
So, if our self is a narrative, and narratives can be broken, how do we use language to fix that damage? This is where narrative intervention comes in.
Right, and the focus of that therapeutic process is all about changing the meaning of the self-defining narrative. You're not arguing about whether the painful events were real or not,
Of course not.
because the brain treats the past, the present, and the potential future as these interconnected neural maps. We can effectively do a kind of mental time travel. We can go back and renegotiate the meaning of past trauma.
Let's use that powerful example from the source material. The child who was struck by his father. The initial negative narrative was just devastating. My father hit me with a belt. He hates me.
And that led to a self-concept of low worth, a hypersensitivity to any kind of rejection. The intervention, then, is about finding the contextual narrative.
The bigger picture.
Exactly. The patient was guided to recall the full context of what happened, and they eventually remembered that the event took place right after they were caught playing with fire near the family's woodpile.
And the whole narrative shifted.
Completely. The new concept became, my father hit me because he was afraid for my safety. The meaning of that physical act changed from rejection to, well, to a misguided expression of love and fear. The self-concept was repaired because the story was no longer about being worthless.
That reinterpretation restores agency, and that's the key to a functional narrative. We see the same thing with the patient whose husband cheated, a classic broken plotline. The goal just vanishes.
And a therapist doesn't spend time dwelling on the betrayal. They focus on finding what are called exception events.
Things that contradict the current story of collapse.
Right, positive resources. Her education, her mother's financial stability, maybe interest shown by new suitors. By highlighting those resources, the therapist helps her build a new, empowering, and coherent source path goal narrative. The old event doesn't go away, but its meaning changes from the end of my life to a necessary step toward realizing my own independence.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We've seen that language is really the crucible of meaning. It is the primary tool that determines how we perceive, how we react emotionally, and ultimately the truth we live out every single day.
And a life-sustaining narrative has to be three things. It has to be holistic. It has to connect your past, present, and future seamlessly. It has to be coherent with a consistent theme and chronology. And it has to establish a clear cause and effect, which gives the self a sense of agency and purpose.
The moment we choose our words, the moment we structure a sentence, we are performing this profound act of creation. We're creating a reality that, may not perfectly match the physical world, but it's internally consistent and unbelievably powerful.
And this structural power of language brings us back to those really high stakes we mentioned at the beginning. As the source material notes, referencing Nietzsche, God will continue to exist as long as humanity still believes in the grammar of language.
That is a truly potent final thought. It suggests that our inherent human need for structure, that grammar that insists on a subject, a verb, an object, that is the very thing that drives us to create these huge, powerful, abstract concepts outside of ourselves.
The silent rules of syntax dictate the self we become, the future we chase, and even the abstract forces we believe in.
I invite you to reflect on the unseen grammatical rules that are shaping every corner of your world.
That was the deep dive. See you next time.